The morning sun shone through Haven's biodome, creating rainbow patterns on the garden paths. 8-year-old Jinwoo loved these morning walks. He held his small watering can, moving from flower to flower in the community garden. His aunt Hanbyul had given him the red watering can for his birthday last month, before she left for her space fleet duties. "Remember to water the roots, not the leaves," he repeated to himself, copying what his mother always said. The roses were his favorite, earth flowers that now grew on this distant world, 30 light years from humanity's home planet. Haven was a peaceful colony. Most days, the biggest excitement was watching the supply ships land at the spaceport 5 miles away. The colony's buildings shone silver under the purple-tinted sky, their metal surfaces reflecting the light of Haven's twin suns. Jinwoo stopped when he heard a strange sound. It was like thunder, but different. Looking up through the biodome's clear panels, he saw shapes in the sky. They weren't the usual transport ships he knew so well. These were darker, with sharp edges that reminded him of the throwing stars in old ninja movies. The colony's warning sirens began to sound. Jinwoo had heard them before, but only during practice drills. This time, they seemed louder, more urgent. His watering can fell from his hands as he watched more ships appear in the sky. "All colonists, please move to the safety bunkers immediately," the computer's voice spoke through the garden speakers. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Jinwoo knew he should run to the bunkers. They had practiced this in school, but his feet wouldn't move. The dark ships were getting closer, and now he could see energy beams shooting from them. The colony's defensive shields lit up as they tried to block the attacks. Jinwoo, his teacher, Ms. Park, was running toward him from the school building. "Jinwoo, come quickly." He finally turned to run toward her. The ground shook as explosions rang out above the dome. Pieces of the defensive shield were failing, creating holes in the protection above them. Ms. Park was only 30 feet away when the first beam broke through the dome. The garden's emergency force field activated, keeping their air from escaping into space, but it couldn't stop the energy weapons. Jinwoo saw the bright flash coming down. His last thought was of his aunt Hanbyul, and how he wouldn't be able to show her how well he'd taken care of her roses. The beam struck. Ms. Park screamed. In Earth Fleet Command's incident report, filed 3 hours later, Jinwoo became more than just a name. He became the first human child killed by the voidborn species. The report was cold and clear. At 8:47 colony time, Haven settlement came under attack by unidentified vessels, later confirmed to be voidborn warships. The colony's defensive systems were insufficient against the level of firepower deployed. First casualty. Jinwoo, age 8, struck by direct energy weapon fire in the colony's biodome garden. Multiple additional casualties followed as the attack continued. The Voidborn had attacked other colonies before. They had fought with human ships. They had made threats and demands, but they had never killed a child. They didn't understand what this would mean. They didn't know about Earth's deadliest fleet, kept in reserve for generations. They didn't know about the weapons Earth had developed but never used, considering them too powerful for normal conflicts. Most importantly, they didn't know what would happen when humanity united in rage and sorrow over a child's death. As Jinwoo's body lay in the burned garden he loved, surrounded by the ashes of his aunt's roses, messages were already flying between Earth's military command centers. The Voidborn had broken an unwritten rule of warfare. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. In the hours that followed, as Haven's survivors huddled in their bunkers and rescue ships raced toward the colony, Earth's response began. The deadliest fleet, dormant for 50 years, received its activation codes, and in her quarters aboard the flagship Child's Memory, Captain Hanbyul received the message about her nephew's death. The Voidborn had killed a human child. They were about to learn why that was the biggest mistake they could have made. Admiral Song stood at the main window of Earth Fleet Command, his hands clasped behind his back. The holographic display showed Haven Colony's distress signal blinking in angry red. He had read the casualty report 5 times now. Each time, his eyes stopped at the same line. First casualty. Jin Woo, age 8. Sir, his assistant entered the room quietly. Captain Han Byol's ship is requesting direct communication. The Admiral closed his eyes for a moment. Han Byol was one of his best officers, and now he had to tell her about her nephew. The screen lit up, showing Captain Han Byol's face. She was already in her combat uniform. Admiral, I saw the alert about Haven Colony. My family. Han Byol, he said softly, using her first name for the first time in years. I'm sorry. Jinwoo was in the gardens when they attacked. The captain's face didn't change. Her eyes didn't water. But Admiral Song saw her hands grip her chair's armrests so hard that her knuckles turned white. The Voidborn? She asked, her voice steady. Yes. They broke through Haven's shields at 8:47 local time. Jinwoo was. He paused. He was watering the roses you gave him. Now something did break in Han Byol's expression. Just for a second. Then her military training took over. Sir, I request permission to lead the response fleet. Denied, Admiral Song said. Han Byol started to protest, but he held up his hand. Denied because you won't be leading a response fleet. You'll be commanding the flagship of the Deadliest fleet. Her eyes widened. Everyone knew about Earth's Deadliest fleet, the ships that carried weapons too powerful to use in normal battles. The fleet that had been waiting 50 years for a moment when Earth needed to show its full strength. The whole fleet, sir. The whole fleet. Admiral Song turned to look at the global display. Red dots were appearing all over it as ships received their activation codes. I'm calling in every ship we have. The Voidborn need to learn what happens when they kill our children. In another part of the command center, Fleet Commander Do Young was already working. His fingers flew over the tactical displays as he planned the fleet's formation. The Deadliest fleet had never been used in real combat. Its ships carried quantum weapons that could tear apart the fabric of space itself. Sir, a young officer called out. The Voidborn are sending a message. They say Haven Colony was in their claimed space. They say we should have evacuated when warned. Do Young's hand slammed down on his desk. The room went quiet. Send them this message, he said. His voice was calm, but cold. The death of Jin Woo, age 8, has been noted. Earth's Deadliest fleet is now engaging. No further communication will be accepted until after their complete surrender. Across the solar system, ships were powering up. The massive carrier, Child's Memory, broke orbit from Jupiter's moon Europa, where it had waited for decades. The stealth destroyers emerged from their hidden bases in the asteroid belt. The quantum cruisers, their weapons never before fired in anger, lifted from their underground bases on Mars. Captain Han Byol walked through her ship's corridors toward the bridge. Crew members stepped aside, saluting. They had all heard about Jinwoo. News traveled fast in the fleet. Many of them had children of their own in the colonies. Captain on the bridge. Someone called out as she entered. Han Byol took her command chair. On her personal screen was the last photo Jinwoo had sent her, standing proudly next to his roses. She touched the screen once, then closed the image. Navigation, she said. Set course for Jump Point Alpha. All weapon systems to full power, and put Jinwoo's photo on the main screen. I want everyone to remember why we're doing this. The massive ship's engines fired up. Across the system, hundreds of other ships did the same. Earth had been patient with the Voidborn's aggression. They had tried diplomacy. They had given warnings. But now the rules had changed. A child had died in a garden, trying to grow roses on a distant world. And Earth's Deadliest fleet was awakening to answer that death. Jump Point Alpha buzzed with activity. Hundreds of warships gathered there, their metal hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. The sight would have made any enemy fleet turn and run. But this was not just any fleet. This was Earth's Deadliest fleet, awakened after 50 years of silence. Commander Du Young stood in the main briefing room of the command ship. Around him, 50 captains sat quietly, waiting for his words. A large hologram showed their fleet's position. At the front of the room, Captain Hanbyel sat straight in her chair, her eyes fixed on the battle plans. For 50 years, Du Young began, we have kept our strongest weapons hidden. Today we use them. He waved his hand, and the hologram changed to show their target. Voidborn space. The enemy thinks they know Earth's power. They are wrong. He pressed a button, and a new image appeared. It showed the quantum weapons that each ship now carried. These were not normal space guns. These weapons could tear holes in reality itself. The quantum torpedoes can break any shield, Du Young explained. The reality-splitting beams can cut through any armor. But he paused, looking at each captain. We will only hit military targets. We are not monsters. We are not killers of children. In the audience, several captains nodded. They had all seen the picture of Jinwoo, the small boy who died while watering his roses. His death had awakened this fleet, but they would not dishonor his memory by killing innocent Voidborn civilians. Captain Hanbyel stood up. Show them the new defense systems, she said. Her voice was calm, but everyone could hear the steel in it. Du Young nodded. The hologram changed again, showing the special shields that protected their ships. The Voidborn's weapons cannot hurt us, he said. Our scientists have been busy these 50 years. Every ship in this fleet is protected by quantum shields. Regular weapons will feel like raindrops against them. In space outside the command ship, crews were making final checks. Engineers tested the new weapons, making sure each quantum torpedo was perfect. Pilots practiced flying in the tight formations they would need. Doctors prepared their medical bays, hoping they wouldn't be needed. Message from Earth Command. A young officer called out. Our allies are asking what we're doing. They've never seen so many Earth ships in one place. Commander Du Young smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. Tell them what Admiral Song told me to say. Stay out of this one. Earth will handle it alone. The captains began leaving the briefing room, heading back to their ships. Captain Hanbyel stayed behind. She walked to the hologram and looked at the battle plan again. Your plan is good, she told Du Young. Quick, clean, and precise. But the Voidborn won't surrender easily. They don't need to surrender easily, Du Young replied. They just need to surrender before we reach their homeworld. He looked at her carefully. Are you ready for this, Hanbyel? It's your nephew we're avenging. Hanbyel touched the fleet insignia on her uniform. I'm ready. Jinwoo loved stories about space battles. He always wanted the good guys to win. She straightened her shoulders. We're the good guys. We'll show them how Earth protects its children. Outside, the fleet was almost ready. Each ship glowed with power, their quantum engines humming with energy that could tear space apart. The flagship Child's Memory sat in the center, its huge hull painted with Earth's symbol, and, beneath it, a single rose. In his command center, Du Young made the final checks. Every ship reported ready. Every weapon was prepared. Every crew member knew their job. All ships, he broadcast to the fleet. This is Commander Du Young. Today we show the galaxy why Earth's deadliest fleet was kept secret for so long. Today we show them why no one should ever harm a human child. He paused. For Jinwoo. For Jinwoo, hundreds of voices answered across the communication channels. The engines of 1,000 ships lit up together. In formation, Earth's deadliest fleet began to move. They looked beautiful and terrible, like angels of justice carrying weapons that could reshape reality. The Voidborn had killed a child who only wanted to grow flowers. Now they would learn what that mistake would cost them. Lieutenant Jai Yun's stealth ship glided silently through space. Her small squadron of 5 ships led Earth's deadliest fleet toward Voidborn territory. Their job was simple: find the enemy's defensive line and study their weapons. Contact, Her sensor officer whispered, "3 Voidborn patrol ships ahead." Jia-Yun nodded. Her ship, the Silent Steppe, was invisible to normal sensors. The Voidborn ships passed by without noticing them. She watched their weapons carefully. The energy readings were exactly what she expected. Strong, but nothing compared to Earth's quantum weapons. "Send the data back to the fleet," she ordered. "And mark these coordinates. The main fleet will want to know where their border patrol is." Behind her squadron, 1,000 Earth ships waited in formation. Their quantum engines were quiet, their weapons ready. They just needed Jia-Yun's report to begin. The sensor officer suddenly grabbed her arm. "Lieutenant, large energy spike ahead. They're powering up their main defensive line." Through her viewport, Jia-Yun saw it. A line of massive Voidborn battleships stretched across space. Their dark hulls absorbed the starlight, making them look like holes in space. Energy weapons charged along their sides, ready to fire at any attacker. "They've prepared well," Jia-Yun said quietly. "But not well enough. Send the complete scan to Captain Hanbyul." On the flagship Child's Memory, Hanbyul received Jia-Yun's data. She studied the Voidborn defense line carefully. Their ships were powerful, their formation strong. Against a normal fleet, it would be an impossible barrier to break. But this was not a normal fleet. All ships, Hanbyul's voice carried across the fleet's communication channels. "This is the flagship. Lieutenant Jia-Yun has found their defensive line. They think they're ready for us." She paused. "Show them how wrong they are." Earth's deadliest fleet moved forward as one. The stealth squadron pulled back, their job done. Now it was time for the main force to work. The Voidborn saw them coming. Their communication channels filled with urgent messages. They had never seen so many Earth ships together. Their sensors showed energy readings that made no sense, power levels that seemed impossible. "Enemy fleet is charging weapons," reported Hanbyul's tactical officer. She nodded. "Let them fire first. Let them see how useless their weapons are." The Voidborn fired. Thousands of energy beams shot across space toward Earth's fleet. They were powerful enough to destroy normal ships easily. But when they hit the quantum shields, they vanished like rain hitting a hot stone. "No damage," the report came from across the fleet. Shields holding at full strength. Now it was Earth's turn. "All ships," Hanbyul commanded. "Single shot. Show them what real power looks like." 1,000 quantum torpedoes launched at once. They didn't look impressive, just small points of light moving through space. The Voidborn shields lit up, ready to block them. But quantum torpedoes didn't care about shields. They passed through them like they weren't there. When they hit the Voidborn ships, they didn't explode. Instead, they created tiny holes in reality itself. Metal twisted in impossible ways. Space itself seemed to bend. 20 Voidborn ships disappeared in the first volley. Not exploded, just ceased to exist, pulled into the quantum holes that the torpedoes created. Message from the enemy flagship called out the communication officer. "They're asking what weapons we're using. They'd want to talk." Hanbyul looked at the picture of Jinwoo on her screen. The little boy smiled back. Forever 8 years old, forever tending his roses. "Send them this message," she said. "This is not war. This is punishment. You killed a child. These weapons have waited 50 years to answer such a crime. We will not stop until you surrender completely." The Voidborn tried to fight back. Their weapons flashed uselessly against the quantum shields. More of their ships vanished as Earth's fleet fired again and again. In an hour, their defensive line was gone. Lieutenant Jia-Yun watched from her stealth ship as the Voidborn fleet retreated in panic. They had expected a battle. Instead, they got a demonstration of power they couldn't understand. "Track their retreat," Hanbyul ordered. "Follow them to their next defensive position." Her voice was steady. "This is just the beginning. They will learn what it means to harm a human child." The Deadliest fleet moved forward, unstoppable, quantum engines humming with power that could reshape reality itself. They had crossed the first line. Many more would fall before this was over. 3 days had passed since the first battle. Earth's deadliest fleet moved through void-borne space like an unstoppable wave. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. Each step was careful and planned. Commander Du Young stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display. Red dots showed void-borne military bases. Green dots showed their civilian areas. His orders were clear. Only the red dots would be hit. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "the void-borne are moving civilians away from their military bases. They're learning." "Good," Du Young said. "They're finally understanding. We're not here for their civilians. We're here for justice, not revenge." Ahead of the main fleet, Captain Han Baiol's flagship led the advance. Under her command, the fleet used a new tactic. They called it the Rose Pattern. Ships arranged in a circular formation that looked like flower petals from above. It wasn't just beautiful, it was deadly. "Another military base ahead," her sensor officer reported. "They're trying to hide it under a civilian shield." Han Baiol studied the readings. "Quantum scan," she ordered. The new sensors could see through any shield, showing what was really there. "Confirm no civilians present." "Confirmed, Captain." "They've evacuated everyone except military personnel." She nodded. "Single shot. Rose Petal 3, you have the honor." One ship broke formation. Its quantum torpedo launched, a small point of light that carried universe-bending power. The base disappeared, pulled into a tiny hole in space itself. "Message from the base commander," her communication officer said. "It arrived just before we fired. They say they're sorry about the child." Han Baiol's hands gripped her chair. "Sorry doesn't bring back Jinwoo. Sorry doesn't make the roses grow again." Across void-borne space, more messages arrived at Earth Command. The void-borne offered peace talks. They offered territory. They offered anything to stop Earth's fleet. Admiral Song's answer was always the same: complete surrender, nothing less. In his command center, Commander Du Young received reports from all parts of the fleet. The quantum weapons worked perfectly. The shields held against everything. But most importantly, not a single civilian had been harmed. "Sir," an officer reported, "the Voidborn are falling back to their inner defense ring. They're gathering everything they have left around their homeworld." Du Young looked at the map. The Voidborn had lost 60% of their military power. Their mighty space fleet was running. Their bases were gone, but they still wouldn't surrender. "They still don't understand," he said quietly. "They think we'll get tired. They think we'll stop." He shook his head. "Send the next set of coordinates to Captain Han Baiol. Let's show them how wrong they are." On the flagship Child's Memory, Han Baiol received the coordinates. Her crew worked quietly, efficiently. They had done this many times now. Each base, each military target, disappeared into the quantum holes. Clean, precise, unavoidable. "Captain," her science officer spoke up. "I've been studying the quantum torpedo effects. The holes we're making, they're not destroying things exactly. They're moving them somewhere else, somewhere we can't see." "Somewhere else?" Han Baiol asked. "Yes, Captain. Whatever we hit, it still exists. Just not here. Not in our universe anymore." Han Baiol thought about that. Somewhere, in another reality, all those Voidborn ships and bases still existed. They were learning their lesson in a different universe. Message from the Voidborn High Command. The communication officer announced. They want to know if we'll accept their surrender after we reach their homeworld." "No," Han Baiol said. "They surrender now, or we keep going. There is no later. There is no negotiation." She touched the picture of Jinwoo on her screen. "They chose this when they fired at a garden." The fleet moved forward again. The rose pattern formation spread out, quantum engines humming. Ahead lay the Voidborn's last defenses, their strongest ships, their best weapons. It wouldn't be enough, because Earth's fleet wasn't fighting for territory or power. They were fighting because a child died while watering his flowers. They were fighting because some lines should never be crossed. And they would keep fighting until the lesson was learned, no matter how long it took. The Voidborn homeworld hung in space like a dark jewel. Around it, their remaining ships formed a tight defensive ring. They had gathered everything they had left. 300 ships, their newest weapons, their best warriors. Lieutenant Jai Yun's stealth squadron slipped through their defenses like ghosts. Her ships scanned everything. Their planetary shields, their ground-based weapons, their emergency bunkers. Final scan complete, she reported to the fleet. They put everything into defending their world. But she paused, checking her readings again. They've also moved all civilians underground. They're protecting their own children. On the flagship Child's Memory, Captain Hanbyol received the report. They're learning, she said softly. Finally learning. Earth's deadliest fleet emerged from jump space in the rose pattern formation. 1,000 ships, their quantum weapons ready, their shields humming with power that could bend reality. At the center, the Child's Memory led the way, its hull still bearing the painted rose symbol. The Voidborn Supreme Commander's voice came through all channels. Earth Fleet, please respond. We wish to discuss terms. Hanbyol looked at Commander Du Yum on her screen. He nodded. This time, they would answer. This is Captain Hanbyol, she said. You know our terms. Complete surrender, nothing less. We have protected our civilians, the Voidborn commander said. We understand now what we did wrong. The child. We didn't know humans valued their young so deeply. His name was Jinwoo. Hanbyol's voice was like steel. He was 8 years old. He was watering roses when your ships fired. Silence filled the communication channels. In that quiet moment, both sides could feel the weight of what had happened, of what was about to happen. You have 1 hour, Commander Du Yum announced. Surrender completely, or we will remove your military capability entirely. Your choice. The Voidborn tried one last time to fight. Their ships charged forward, weapons blazing. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, gravity bombs, everything they had left, thrown at Earth's fleet in one desperate attack. The quantum shields didn't even flicker. All ships, Hanbyol commanded, rose pattern attack. Target military vessels only. Show them what they're facing. Earth's fleet moved like dancers in space. The rose patterns spread out, each petal of ships targeting a different section of the Voidborn defense. Quantum torpedoes launched in perfect sequence. Reality itself seemed to bend. Where mighty Voidborn warships had been, tiny holes in space appeared. Ships vanished, not destroyed but removed from this universe entirely. In 10 minutes, half their remaining fleet was gone. Hold fire, Du Yum ordered. Let them see what just happened. The Voidborn Supreme Commander's voice shook when he spoke again. What? What are you? We are Earth, Hanbyol answered. We are what happens when you kill an innocent child. We are the power we held back for 50 years, waiting for a moment when it was truly needed. She touched Jinwoo's picture on her screen. You killed a boy who only wanted to grow flowers. Now you understand what that means. Lieutenant Jai Yun's sensors picked up movement from the planet. Captain, they're powering down their defense grid. All their remaining ships are standing down. The Voidborn Supreme Commander's image appeared on all screens. He looked old, tired, and very afraid. We surrender, he said, completely and without conditions. We understand now. We will never harm another human child. Hanbyol looked at Du Yum. He nodded slowly. Surrender accepted, she said. Power down all your military systems. Prepare to receive Earth's representatives. We will discuss the terms that will ensure this never happens again. As the Voidborn ships powered down their weapons, Earth's fleet maintained the rose pattern formation. They had won without destroying a single civilian target. They had shown power beyond imagination, but used it with precision and control. In her cabin later, Hanbiel looked at the last picture of Jinwoo. "It's done," she whispered. "They'll never hurt another child like they hurt you. The roses can grow safely now." The quantum engines hummed quietly as Earth's deadliest fleet held position around the Voidborn homeworld. They had come seeking not revenge, but justice. They had shown not just power, but control. And across the galaxy, every species learned an important lesson. Never harm a human child. The consequences were universe-bending. 1 month after the surrender, Haven Colony's biodome garden bloomed again. New roses grew where Jinwoo's had been destroyed. Their red petals opened under the purple sky, stronger and more beautiful than before. Captain Hanbiel stood in the garden, wearing her formal uniform. Around her, representatives from 50 alien species gathered for the signing of the Children's Protection Treaty. Even the Voidborn were there, their dark shapes standing quietly at the back. Admiral Song stepped up to the speaker's platform. The garden went quiet. "Today," he began, "we gather to ensure that what happened here never happens again. The death of one child brought out Earth's greatest power. But power without purpose is meaningless. We chose to use that power with precision, with control, and with justice." In orbit above them, Earth's deadliest fleet still held its rose-pattern formation. The ships would stay until the treaty was signed. Their quantum weapons remained ready, a reminder of why everyone had come. Commander Du Young watched from his seat as the Voidborn Supreme Commander walked to the platform. The alien leader looked different now, humbler, wiser perhaps. "We made a terrible mistake," the Voidborn leader said. "We thought power meant firing weapons at any target. Earth showed us true power, the strength to hold back, to protect, to use great force with great care." He looked at the roses. "We learned this lesson at a horrible price. A child died here. We will never forget that." Lieutenant Jai-yun, sitting with her stealth squadron pilots, watched as each species signed the treaty. The document was simple but powerful. No child of any species would ever be targeted in war. No civilian areas would be attacked. Breaking these rules would bring the combined force of all signing species as punishment. Then it was Hanbiel's turn to speak. She walked to the platform, touching the roses as she passed them. In her hand, she held Jinwoo's red watering can. "My nephew loved these gardens," she said. "He believed that beautiful things could grow anywhere, even on distant worlds under purple skies." He was right. She held up the watering can. This was his tool. Not a weapon, not a shield, just a simple can to help flowers grow. But his death showed the galaxy something important. She paused, looking at each alien representative. It showed that Earth's greatest power isn't in our quantum weapons or our reality-bending ships. Our greatest power is in how we use that strength. We could have destroyed the Voidborn completely. Instead, we chose to teach them. We chose to make them understand. The Voidborn leader bowed his head in acknowledgement. "Today," Hanbiel continued, "we plant new seeds. Seeds of peace, of understanding, of protection for all children, human and alien alike." Jinwoo would have liked that. He always wanted to share his flowers with everyone. She knelt and poured water on the roses from Jinwoo's can. As she did, representatives from each species came forward, adding water from their own worlds to the garden. In the days that followed, Earth's deadliest fleet finally powered down their quantum weapons. The ships returned to their hidden bases, ready to sleep again until needed. The story of their mission spread across the galaxy, not as a tale of destruction, but as a lesson in justice and control. Lieutenant Jai-yun's stealth squadron made one final pass over Haven before leaving. Below, she could see the garden glowing under the purple sky. Flowers from 50 worlds now grew where Jinwoo had tended his roses. In her quarters on the child's memory, Hanbiel packed away her uniform. The ship would return to its base, its mission complete. But first, she had one last task. She took Jinwoo's picture from her screen and placed it in the colony's memorial garden. Below it, she left his watering can. The inscription read, Jinwoo, age 8. He taught the galaxy that the measure of power is not in how much force you use, but in how carefully you use it. His roses grow forever. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Earth's deadliest fleet had shown its power. But in the end, a little boy's love for growing flowers had taught everyone something more important than fear. It had taught them wisdom. And in a garden under a purple sky, roses bloomed, watched over by children of all species, growing together in peace.